With more and more Texans voting early in the election, climate change is one of the many high-profile issues on their mind. In the second edition of UT Voices, we spoke with UT students from different backgrounds and experiences about their thoughts on climate change, along with the government response to it, and ultimately how it will influence what presidential candidate they will vote for.
Climate change is one of those tricky ones. I don't think the world's going to end in 10 years because of it. I do think it's a real issue, but I don't think the majority of solutions that are being proposed for it are even, logical.
I believe climate change it's the biggest issue that is facing our country, not just our country, but the whole world. It's the only earth we have. We should be doing everything to protect it. And while climate change is going on, there are many things that are changing in our country because of that. Rising sea levels, we're seeing more powerful and dangerous storms hitting the East Coast. A lot of the forest fires happening in the West, especially in California.
I believe obviously climate change is real, and I think we need to have more systemic policies in place that ensure that we're moving in the right direction moving forward and reducing CO2 emissions as a whole. Also, with the decrease in just fracking overall.
While climate change is real, and while climate change does have a human fingerprint on it, I don't think that one, it is something that is going to kill us all, like a lot of people have been saying. And two, I don't think that it is something that we need to completely overhaul and kill our economy and society over.
First off, it doesn't matter how much money we save if none of us can breathe. If it's too hot for us to go outside, if our cities are underwater, we funnel massive amounts of money to the Pentagon, to the military, both of which are extreme contributors to climate change. I know a lot of people who are well-meaning who are like, well, we have to fight climate change while prioritizing the economy. I think that transitioning to hybrid cars or completely electric cars, that's going to create a ton of jobs.
Keeping the economy in mind is necessary. Where should the line be drawn on how your solutions affect my life? If you're putting a mandate on a carbon tax, for example, at some point I'm going to say, okay, I'm fed up with this, and I'll start lowering my carbon emissions. But I'm not going to be here, and I'm not going to sit here and support a Green New Deal. The Green New Deal, first of all, is one of the biggest trash heaps in policy history. There is almost no way that it's going to significantly help the climate change scenario.
People often only talk about the costs of changing and creating new deals, like the Green New Deal, but we never talk about the revenues and the benefits, right? That's what creates the overall profit of so many of the great plans that we can have moving forward that will lead to so much economic growth. I think people get so caught up in it's going to cost this. I'm like, great. It's also going to create millions of jobs. It's also going to add so much to our GDP and create a new, different approach to how we do businesses moving forward.
So it's a question of, should we rely on cheap, efficient energy like natural gas and oil, or should we try to go towards unreliable energy such as wind and solar that is nearly triple the cost and yet causes blackouts all across California? We've been getting more efficient gasifiers, more efficient generators that use less fuel, put out less emissions, and that has done a much better job at reducing our emissions, yet not completely tanking our economy.
So I definitely think this administration has done a poor job in addressing climate change. It feels like it wants to focus more on the economy aspect and retaining those industries while they may be providing jobs to people, they are contributing to the acceleration of climate change and the pollution in our country. They don't really want to acknowledge the science behind climate change. For example, President Trump saying in regards to the wildfires in California, quote, it's just going to get colder in the winter. That's not, it's a lot more nuanced and complicated.
The administration publicly has said the right things, that we need to increase the use of natural gas. We need to continue being a net exporter of energy to the rest of the world. Climate's going to change no matter what we do in this country. What it's more about is it's more about reducing pollution. As President Trump said during the debate, he wants the cleanest air, most pristine water. And I feel like that is the right tone we need to the right chord we need to strike.
I think the primary approach to like the Trump administration when it comes to climate change has honestly been horrendous. I mean, we've seen from countless times discount the clear facts and evidence that so many of our scientists have brought up as a whole. I mean, we pulled out the Paris Climate Accords. He rejects the Green New Deal, which is going to create millions of jobs. And as a whole, I think a lot of his moves have been probably very self-motivated, which I think compared to the Biden-Harris administration, we're not going to see that as much.
Climate change is not really going to affect my voting habits, probably this election cycle, next election cycle, or probably within the next 10 years, unless we start seeing, seriously significant problems, such as my house catching a blaze for no apparent reason other than the sun is scorching it. If I'm going to vote on climate change, it's going to be to, vote against the person who's going to drastically change my everyday life for a minimal amount of effect on climate change.
I trust Joe Biden to put us back into the Paris Accord. Joe Biden has made a climate task force, which I think will at least, help us move forward a little bit. But I honestly do think that this issue is not going to be solved entirely by legislation. It's going to take protest on our part. It's going to be the fight of our lives.
The issue of climate change doesn't necessarily affect my vote as much in this cycle because Vice President Biden hasn't taken if it was like AOC running for president, for example, proposing the Green New Deal, I think it would have been much more in the forefront of my mind. But the Biden plan is not as draconian or as extreme. Like I said, the United States have done much better than the rest of the world, especially those that signed the Paris Climate Accords, in reducing our emissions and reducing our carbon footprint. And that has happened naturally through innovation. And I feel that President Trump is best suited for that because his administration encourages innovation and encourages the market to do what it does best and find the most efficient ways to use our resources.
They're looking at the insights that scientists have drawn, right? And they've looked at those insights and worked to draw a strategy and draw up a plan. So moving forward, when they win, they can execute it much more effectively. Right now, there is no plan from the Trump administration. The plan is business as usual.
I feel like Joe Biden would do I wouldn't say a great job because he has come out as saying he doesn't really support the Green Deal, but I feel like his policies would mitigate most of the effects of climate change, starting to invest more in renewable resources. Of course, it's not going to nearly be enough to completely stop the forces of climate change, but I feel like at this point would be a lot better than doing nothing at all.